Well, good evening. Welcome to Center Stage at Beth Israel, the West Temple. We're so happy to have a very special guest with us this evening. Could you introduce yourself, please?
I would. I'm Lee Weingart. I am running for Cuyahoga County Executive this year.
And tell us, how long of a campaign has this so far been for you, sir?
I started the campaign in February of last year, 2021. The idea was to get out and talk to the voters as much as I could. I've talked to thousands of people over the last 14 months. There was a great desire for change. We saw that last year in the mayor's race in Cleveland, where you had a relatively unknown young man become mayor, Justin Bibb. That same need for change, for something different in county government, I think is present. And so we're really feeding off that in this campaign. Our agenda for the county involves a lot of change, focusing on the needs of the people more than the needs of the government.
Tell us your prior history of elected office.
Sure. So I was county commissioner in the mid-1990s, from 1995 to 1997. I was 28 years old at the time.
Wow.
I think I was the youngest person to serve as county commissioner, at least among the youngest people to serve. It was a tumultuous time in Cuyahoga County government. We had lost $114 million in an investment scheme that was called SAFE, ironically. We were forced to economize the budget, and in 2 years, I turned that $114 million deficit into a $40 million surplus without raising anybody's taxes. At the same time, the Browns were making noise for a new or renovated stadium. And so we had passed, prior to my time becoming county commissioner, a tax on alcohol and tobacco, a so-called sin tax.
Yes.
And it had been passed by the voters, but very narrowly, 51 to 49, and that built what was then called Jacobs Field and Gund Arena. So I become county commissioner, and the Browns want a new stadium. So there's talk of extending that sin tax to pay for a Browns stadium, but without a vote of the people. And I said, well, we can't do that. They voted on it the first time, they'll vote on it again. So I campaigned for extending the sin tax, and even though the Sunday before the vote, Art Modell pulled the team out of Cleveland and went to Baltimore, we passed that extension by a record 72% margin. We used that as evidence with the NFL to bring the Browns back to Cleveland, which of course we did in 1999. So I had an interesting 2 years as county commissioner, and now I'm coming back 26 years later to become county executive.
So when you were there were three people were involved.
There were.
And how many more years were there of the three people before the amendment changed?
So the last county commissioner government was in 2010.
Okay.
In 2010, you had the election of Ed Fitzgerald as county executive.
Yes.
He took over January 1st, 2011. So you had the single county executive, and then the 11 county council members took office on January 1st, 2011.
So is this then your third campaign? You ran once and won, ran once and lost, and now?
This is my third campaign, correct.
And have you ever run for office other than county executive?
I have not.
Did you think when you were at that young age, county elected, oh my gosh, my future is amazing, I'm going to go up and up and up the scale? I mean, did you have that kind of view?
Well, I think when you're young, you're always thinking about your future and what the present can do to lead to your future. We had so much work to do when I was county commissioner. It was hard to imagine anything other than being county commissioner. Even though county commissioner was on the books a part-time job, I used it as a full-time job. So I was there 40 plus hours a week, and then at night I would go out and I'd campaign to hold my seat. And I learned a lot as county commissioner. I had two Democratic colleagues, Tim Hagan and Mary Boyle. And I learned a lot from them, actually. I learned that county government really isn't all that partisan. So I tell people, when I was county commissioner, we had 3,000 votes among the three of us, Tim Hagan, Mary Boyle, and myself. Of those 3,000 votes, only 6 were 2-1, which means the vast majority were 3-0. Of those 6 that were 2-1, 5 were Hagan and Weingart versus Boyle, and 1 was Hagan and Boyle versus Weingart. So even when there was a split, it wasn't a partisan split.
And you only had one negative vote then.
That's right. Out of 3,000, not bad.
And you grew up on the east side.
I did. I was raised in Cleveland Heights, went to Heights High School. I graduated in 1984.
And your college of choice was?
I went to DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, a small school.
Yeah.
Then I went to law school, George Washington Law School in Washington, D.C. Started my career working at a little law firm called Jones Day. And then I became county commissioner. And then for the last 20 years, I've been running a firm that I started in 2002 called LNE Group, which is named for my wife and my 3 children, Lizzie, Ned, and Ethan.
So tell us, a quick form, if you can, what drew you away from the strict law practice?
So I went to law school with a mind of becoming a public servant.
You did.
I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be in public service.
Huh.
And I looked at the landscape and saw that most members of Congress or senators or executives in public service were lawyers, or many of them at least were. And it gives you a good base. It gives you ability to concisely express your thoughts, which of course is very important in politics. When I was in Washington, D.C., my second year I worked for Dan Quayle, who was Vice President of the United States at the time. Then my third year I worked for a guy who was not very well known then called Ken Starr, Solicitor General, who went on to a much bigger career, as we know, with the Clinton administration. But I always knew in the back of my mind I wanted to get in public service, and so I had the opportunity at a young age when I was county commissioner. And then I've been out for a long time. We had 3 children, and that required me to have a job and earn some money and take care of them. They are now 25, 23, and 20, so they're well on their way, and it's time for me to get back into the public service that I've wanted to be in for a long time.
Tell us at the local level, county level, what the difference is between a Democrat and a Republican?
You know, it's hard to find a difference between a Republican and Democrat, I think. It's been a long time since Republicans had any control of county government, since I was there 26 years ago. I think what makes a good county executive, there are really 4 qualities. The first is experience, and I have that as a former county commissioner. The second is vision, and I think I have that. I will talk about my Cuyahoga 2030 plan, which really lays out a program for the people, not for the government. The third is truthfulness and honesty and openness, and I think that's very important. This government has not been as open and honest as I think we would have expected it to be, and so it'll be a change. We have an executive who is open and transparent and honest. And then fourth, a backbone, applying the rules to everybody equally. So no one gets special deals, no insider deals, really making sure we follow the rules in county government. Those 4 qualities, I believe, make a good county executive, whether he or she be a Democrat or a Republican.
So the issues that you've kind of discussed there, is that how you make your segue into saying there's a crisis in government?
There is a crisis in government. There's no question about that.
Even at the local level?
At the local level. So
Tell us about that.
So when I was county commissioner 25 years ago, the county had $100 million of debt. Today, that debt is $1.2 billion, largely because we've focused the last 25 years in county government on building things. Hilton Hotel, Convention Center, Medical Mart. The Convention Center has worked out okay for the county. Hilton Hotel is a financial disaster, as is the Medical Mart. We're now called the Global Center for Health Innovation. In this year's county budget, which is $515 million, the general fund, $50 million is debt service on the Hilton Hotel and the Medical Mart. We were promised these would be profit-making ventures for Cuyahoga County, but they're not. They're draining precious resources from our general fund, money that would otherwise be used to take care of abused children, neglected seniors, families who are in crisis, people who are addicted, people in the jail. So we've lost our way in county government. When I was county commissioner, we focused on the needs of the people, and we were successful. The last 25 years, they focus on the needs of the government. And I think we need to go back to the trend of really focusing on people. So I'm not going to put any more money into the Medical Mart, unlike one of my opponents who wants to invest $50 million in it and keep it. I would sell the Medical Mart when I become county executive. Hilton Hotel, I would also sell. The county has no business running a hotel. That's a private sector venture that should be left to the private sector.
So the Hilton Hotel was part of the, correct me if I'm wrong, please, was part of the deal to bring the Republican convention to town. We needed rooms. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement, but it is a ludicrous statement at the same time.
Okay.
Who would ever invest $280 million for 3 days of marginal economic activity downtown? There were 1,000 delegates, maybe 1,000 hangers-on. I would guess the economic impact of the RNC in 2016 was in the single-digit millions, low. So nobody in his right mind would spend $280 million to attract a few $1 million over one weekend.
How many employees are there in county government, government-wide?
7,500 in Cuyahoga County government.
And how
But-
many of them would be subject to either being replaced or asked to leave if there's a change in the county executive?
So only the top level. So the directors would be replaced. The people who work within the county executive office itself would be replaced. But for the vast majority, 90+% are civil servants
Yes.
who are there. So they won't be replaced. Now I do have a plan. 1,000 of our county government workers are eligible for early retirement right now. And I would encourage all of them to take the early retirement. They are more expensive employees.
Sure.
I believe we probably are overstaffed in county government. I'll tell you why I think that. Franklin County government, which is Columbus, Ohio, has 6,100 employees. Cuyahoga County, 7,500 employees. Franklin County is now a bigger county than Cuyahoga. So why do we have 1,400 more employees, which is about $100 million in payroll that we're paying that they're not paying in Franklin County? So I would encourage early retirement. And then to the extent we need to replace those employees, I would probably hire people who'd be less expensive, and I think hire fewer of them. I think we could run the government on a smaller budget. In fact, I'm committed to reducing the administrative overhead costs of the government by $50 million when I become county executive. Take those proceeds, $50 million, and invest them right back into the community.
Sometimes when you lose 1,000 people, which is 15%, you also have a brain drain. You may lose people who have 30 or 22 years experience in running a shop somewhere. Is it as easy as just saying take early retirement?
So I think we have manuals to run the county government. We're not talking about brain surgery here. I mean, what the county government has done now is what it did when I was county commissioner 25 years ago. We've changed the form to an executive and a council, but we still have the same basic functions in county government. So you would promote people who are line workers to become managers. They would understand the functions of county government very well. So I'm not concerned with the brain drain as much as I'm concerned about the financial drain on the citizens of Cuyahoga County.
Let's change the subject matter a little bit. How does someone run, I mentioned this last week to Mr. Ronayne, when you want to be a mayor or you want to be a councilman, you walk, you put on your sneakers, and you probably go through 2 sets of sneakers and you knock on every door. How does somebody campaign in a geographic area as big as this?
Well, we will certainly knock on doors. The modern value of science, we can really detect where our voters are or where swing voters are. So we look at all the precincts in Cuyahoga County, and we kind of categorize them as Republican, Democrat, or Independent, and then we look at how much they swing between elections. And then we focus on the precincts, even the streets where we want to absolutely walk and knock on doors. So certainly a ground game is very important. Social media is also very important. I've been on social media starting since last June, spending between $3,000 and $5,000 a month, which is not very much to spend, but it's getting the name out. And then of course you have broadcast television, and you have yard signs and everything else. So it all sort of works together. And I have consultants, I've got a strong campaign team in place already. So we'll knock on doors, we'll use social media, we'll use broadcast television and other devices to get our message to the voters of Cuyahoga County.
So we're of a somewhat similar age. How do your campaign attract those who are 25 to 35?
So I've hired young people to run my campaign for me. My campaign manager is in his late 20s or early 30s. Political director is 23 years old. Fundraisers in her mid 20s. So they have a good, I think, lifeline to the younger people in Cuyahoga County. But I think my vision for the county also connects me to younger voters. When I talk about generating wealth that starts and stays in the urban core of Cuyahoga County, which we've not seen since John Rockefeller walked the streets of Cleveland 110 years ago, that resonates well with a group of younger voters who are activists. They want to see government improving people's lives. That's what I'm running on as for county executive. They don't want to see more things built like hotels and convention centers and medical marts. They want to see their hard-earned tax dollars invested in projects that help people. And that's why I'm running, and that's, I think, how I connect myself to younger voters within the county.
How much will this campaign run you, do you think?
I don't know. We'll raise the money we need to win. It'll cost a lot of money, but I think it's worth it. The county budget is $1.7 billion a year. County executive is arguably the second most important job in Ohio behind governor of Ohio, in terms of executive positions at least. So, we'll have the resources we need to win. I'm not concerned about that.
And does that include your own personal money?
I put in a lot of my own personal money, and I'll put in more as needed.
So tell us how you fundraise. Do you go, well, first let's start with the question overall. What is your fundraising angle? Who do you go to for your contributions?
So you start with family and friends, people that you know. And I still have people from my 1996 reelection campaign that I know who were prominent then and are prominent now, who've been very generous contributors to my campaign. And then you go out from them. You find people that they know and that they know. So you build a network starting with a little core, and you build yourself out. So we do it through a lot of events. I like to do event-based fundraising because I get people in a room. I can talk to them. They can hear my message. They can, transmit that message to other people that they know. So that's important to me. It's part of the job. You have to raise money. No one particularly likes it. I don't mind it because I think if someone donates to my campaign, that means I've convinced them that I have the right message, which I think I do. And so I just raise money, and we'll spend it well, and I'll become the next county executive.
And have you sought funds outside of Cuyahoga County?
I have not sought funds outside of Northeast Ohio that I can think of. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, 90+% of our money comes from Cuyahoga County.
You have to be a natural person with that, or is it hard to say, hi, not only am I good at what I do, but I want you to help me get there?
If you believe in your message, which I do,
yeah.
then it's not hard to raise money. It's not hard to ask for votes either.
Yeah.
And really, it's the same thing. Asking for a contribution, asking for a vote, two sides of a coin. If you believe in what you're doing and that what you're doing is important for the county, it's easy to ask for support, either a contribution or a vote.
So Mr. Ronayne, do you know him personally?
I do know him personally.
Has not run for public office before.
He has run before.
Well, he has run before.
He's run twice and lost twice.
Do you have any communication with him at all?
No, we're opponents in this race.
So does that mean that there can't be a crossing of the divide to communicate at all?
Well, it's a competitive game of politics.
Yes.
The last time I saw Chris was at one of his little festivals he has at University Circle. And he pulled up in a car and he said, we need to compare notebooks. And I said, Chris, we're not going to compare notebooks. We're not going to have lunch. You're my competitor. This is not team sport. And so you run your race, I'll run my race. Election night, we'll talk to each other at that point. So, I'm in this to win. Chris is a nice guy. It's fine. But, if you want to win, you run to win. And that's how I'm running my campaign.
Who is the mentor that has helped you so far and won your campaign?
Well, I think from a very early age, my father is my greatest mentor. He never sought public office, although he worked behind the scenes in Cleveland Heights to elect people to city council and the school board. He also, when he saw a problem, he fixed it. So in 1982, we're at Heights High School, and the football field was atrocious, as was the running track. And he took it upon himself to raise $1 million from the community to refurbish the track and field at Heights High and at Roxborough, then called junior high school. And back then, raising $1 million was not easy.
A lot of money.
And nobody wrote big checks back then. You raised that $100 at a time. But he did it. He saw a problem and he solved it. And so I want to believe that I'm doing the same thing as I run for county executive. I see a problem and I'm trying to solve it. So as mentors go, my father is number one.
And how about a mentor in the political world?
I would say I model myself after people like George Voinovich, Mike DeWine. I believe they were public servants first. They put the interest of the people first over the government. And so if I can be as successful as George Voinovich was and Mike DeWine has been, then I will consider myself to have done a good job as county executive.
I lived in Lakewood for many years, and for many, many years, there'd be a bicyclist in the July 4th parade. And
George
it was Governor Governor Voinovich.
Or Senator Voinovich,
Senator
right.
He would ride his bike.
He would.
Yeah.
With
Talk
Janet alongside.
Yeah, but he was right on the ground. Is that where a politician needs to be more than often on the ground with the people?
So nobody loves parades more than I do.
Okay.
Most public officials or candidates for parades, they walk in the middle of the street and they do the princess wave so no one can touch them or see them. I throw myself into the crowds. So I'll shake, if I can shake 2,000 hands, I'm happy. And people will say, "Are you Lee Weingart?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm Lee Weingart, the guy running." They're like, wow, they are shocked that I'm actually shaking their hand in the crowd.
Yeah.
I think that contact you get with the voters is immeasurably important to the campaign, because you can sense if they like you and they like your message. And I think that'll become even clearer this year for parades on July 4th, Memorial Day, Labor Day, which is of course the big time for parades.
Yeah.
I'll do the same thing, throw myself in the audience, talk to the people as I'm going along and hear their concerns, and then process that and include that in my message as I continue the campaign.
Which raises an interesting point. With all the events you've had now for 14 months, has there been a little swerve in your message because of what you've heard?
I think I have a message. It's bolstered by what I've learned. So I'll give you an example. So
Yes, please.
one of my priorities is to provide property tax relief to senior citizens, those on fixed incomes. So what we're saying is, if you're at least 60 years old and you have less than $50,000 a year of household income, we're going to take the value of your house, taxable value of your house, and roll it back to the pre-2021 level, because that's when we had the big increases in property values last year. And we're going to freeze it at that level until you sell or transfer the house. So this gives seniors a certainty on their property tax payments going forward until they sell the house. I've talked to so many seniors who are concerned about losing their houses to taxes. Good example, a woman in Ward 1 in Cleveland, which is the Lee Harvard area, 87 years old, has owned her house since 1965. Her mortgage is long since paid off, but she's concerned about losing her house to rising property taxes. And in no community on the east side of Cleveland did taxes rise faster than University Circle. So you have gentrification in places like University Circle. People are losing their homes to taxes. So as I hear these stories,
Yes.
it really reinforces in my mind that we have to deliver property tax relief to seniors on fixed incomes. Now, I also have said I'm not going to raise the county portion of the property tax during my time as county executive. Out of every dollar of property tax, roughly 12% comes to Cuyahoga County. And we've raised the portion a lot over the past 3 or 4 years. In 2020, Cuyahoga County raised its property tax by 25%, and then last year, with the increases in property values, you're going to see very high property taxes coming the next 10 years in Cuyahoga County. In fact, of the 3,200 counties in America, only 144 have higher property taxes than Cuyahoga County. That's not a good place for us to be. So as I talk to people, and it reinforces my view that we need property tax relief for seniors, and then other parts of my agenda we can talk about.
So when you're the county executive, you are, of course, a chief executive, but you still have a legislature, 11 of them.
Yep.
You still need them to say yes.
Right.
You still need 6 votes.
That's right.
I mean, if you don't got 6 friends, you don't have a,
Right.
you don't have a thing.
That's right.
It's like, in the city council where there's 7, unless you got 4, you can't
Right.
win.
That's right.
So how do you think, and I'm just trying to segue here to other issues, how do you think you can take all of your 10 critical points and find 6 votes to get them passed?
So, my vision for the county, which is called Cuyahoga 2030, it's on my website, Weingart2022.com, really is not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's not liberal, it's not conservative. It's just common sense policies that I think most people would agree to. So, for example, I talk about generating wealth that starts and stays in the urban core of Cuyahoga County. We do it through 3 ways. First, a program called 10,000 Homes for Cuyahoga County, which is a $600 million program. $100 million from Cuyahoga County, leveraging $500 million from banks, mortgage companies, and foundations to help 10,000 East Side, West Side, first-ring suburban families build, buy, or renovate a private home. Secondly, I want to incentivize job growth in the urban core of Cuyahoga County. In fact, I want to create 4,000 jobs that pay at least $20 an hour with benefits and don't require a college degree. So people who are unemployed in the urban core will have a place to work. And then finally, I want to create an urban entrepreneurship fund of $10 million to help 250 urban entrepreneurs get training and startup capital. Now, who would be opposed to that, right? Republican, Democrat, I don't think it matters. When you're talking about generating wealth that starts and stays in the urban core, I think I can sell that to not just 6 of 11, but 11 of 11 members on county council.
Let's change the subject. It's been in the papers for a couple weeks now. It's a 4-letter word that begins with J and ends in AIL. For some reason that I don't have an answer to, we have an amazingly poor boondoggle of a run judicial issue with a jail.
Right.
We also have the Justice Center, but we don't have to worry about that for this conversation.
Right.
Let's tell us what is wrong with the jail and why we should spend $500 million building a new one on top of a landfill.
So, the jail. When I announced my campaign in February of last year, one of my first things was opposing a $600 million jail, which is what's been proposed, as being too big and too expensive. So the problem in the jail started in 2018, and we've seen 13 people die in the county jail since 2018. Not because of the jail itself. I mean, the jail has bad conditions and it needs to be renovated or replaced. I'm not debating that point. But poor management really has resulted in those deaths. And I think it's because the sheriff reports to the county executive or county council and not to the people of Cuyahoga County. So when I was county commissioner 25 years ago, we had elected county sheriff, a guy called Jerry McFall, who just passed away a couple weeks ago.
That's correct.
Now, when Jerry was elected county sheriff, a death in the jail was a rarity. And if it happened, we talked about it for a long time. Now, in 2018 to today, we've had 13 people die in the county jail. Because I don't think the sheriff really controls the jail. In fact, the jail director, a guy called Ken Mills, was appointed by Armin Budish, the county executive. He should have reported to the sheriff. He actually reported to, I think, the county executive. When you have that level of reporting structure, you're going to have mismanagement and people are going to die. So I think we should elect the county sheriff again. I would go back to elected county sheriff because he would need to face the voters every 4 years. And if somebody died on his term as county sheriff, he'd have to explain why it happened. So if you make the sheriff accountable to the people, I think you'll have a safer condition in jail. Now, on the jail itself, I have called for a much smaller jail if we're going to build a new jail. We can do that through centralized booking, which keeps non-dangerous people out of the jail in the first place. We can do it through diversion and treatment. Those who have a behavioral health condition can be treated instead of put in the county jail. And through bail reform. So those who are arrested on nonviolent offenses who are nonviolent should never be in jail in the first place. I'd like to shrink the capacity of the jail from the current 1,700 to about 1,200. Now, the county wants to build a jail twice that size, 2,400. Franklin County, I go back to Franklin County. Bigger county than Cuyahoga. They just completed 2 new jails, capacity of 1,000. They hope that through diversion, treatment, centralized booking, and bail reform, they can hold that 1,000 number as their capacity. In 2020, in Cuyahoga County, because of COVID, the population of jail got down to 1,000 defendants. If that worked in 2020, why doesn't it work in 2023 or 24 or 25? So let's invest in treatment and diversion and bail reform as much as we invest in a new jail so that we can keep the ones who are truly dangerous in pretrial detention, and we should do that, but those who are not dangerous, those who are addicted or have other challenges can be given a different treatment and keep the jail smaller and less expensive for the voters and the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County.
Let's segue into your private life, the past 20, I think 21 years, 20 years?
26, yeah. 25.
You're in the lobbying business.
I am.
What does a lobbyist do?
So LNE Group started in 2002. We're 20 years old.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Our focus is getting money. So last year, I'll give you an example, on the campaign trail. There was a lot of money available, pandemic relief funds for small businesses, for community organizations. We helped 8 minority-owned restaurants secure about $400,000 of federal pandemic and state pandemic relief funding that kept them in business. We secured $500,000 for Karamu House, the oldest black theater in America, to complete their capital campaign. Secured $500,000 for the United Black Fund to start an entrepreneurial fund for black entrepreneurs that'll be a model for my $10 million fund when I become county executive. I secured $80,000 to put a new roof on the Harvard Community Services Center, which is really a fixture in Ward 1 on the east side of Cleveland, and secured $80,000 to take a house that was going to be demolished in Glenville and refurbish it. It'll become temporary supportive housing for 4 men coming out of the state prison system. So what we do well as lobbyists is identify pots of funding and bring that money back for important causes in Cuyahoga County, in the country, and even in Europe, where we have a small office.
That also includes representing some very big organizations.
We have some clients, sure, that are very big.
And I was on a website called
OpenSecrets.org.
Secrets.
Yes.
It says your biggest client in 2021 was a chemical company named PTT Global Chemical.
Yep.
How does that fit into the idea of being a county commissioner if you're lobbying for a chemical company? Tell me how that works.
We don't discuss our work for clients, but I'm happy to talk about this because it's a well-known project. PTT Global Chemical is a company from Thailand. They are looking to develop an ethane processing facility in Belmont County, Ohio. So ethane is a byproduct of the fracking process. Right now, ethane is used as energy, or it's burned off into the atmosphere, which is a very environmentally dangerous thing. So our client can take ethane, turn it into what's called ethylene, and that is used to make polymers. So we would be substituting burning off ethane into the environment, which is what happens right now, instead using ethane to make polymers. The project itself is a $10 billion project. It's the biggest project in Ohio until Intel came around a few months ago. It'll create 6,000 union-scale construction jobs in Belmont County, but there aren't that many people in Belmont County. So it'll pull people from all over Ohio to work in Belmont County at a union-scale wage. And then it'll create potentially tens of thousands of downstream jobs, high-paying jobs in the polymer industry. So all that work right now is done in places like Louisiana, and we can move those jobs to Ohio. It can be a revolutionary project for Ohio, as big or bigger than Intel in Columbus.
How does being a county commissioner, how do we do that when you're the president of this big company? I mean, obviously you have a full-time job.
Of LNE Group?
Yes.
Yeah, well, so we're a nice, small company. Thank you for saying we're big. I'll need to divorce myself from the company when I become county executive. And so I will seek out opinions from ethics lawyers, the Inspector General of Cuyahoga County, and others who will tell me what I can and cannot do. If it requires selling my company to somebody else, I'll do that. I tell people that's a great problem to have. That means I've won, I'm county executive, I need to dispose of my company. The company has been very profitable, well run by my team this year as I'm running for county executive. So we'll face that when we need to. I'm not concerned about it. We do no work with Cuyahoga County as a company. Our work is Columbus, other state capitals, Washington, D.C., and in Europe. So we have no clients with interest in Cuyahoga County, for example. And but even having said that, I have a very strict ethical standard for myself as county executive. And I'll make sure that we maintain that standard and that there's no even appearance of impropriety between this company and my job as county executive.
Do you work for any municipalities in Northeast Ohio?
Many. We've helped many over the years pull down road and construction funds. So yeah, we've been very successful for municipalities, nonprofit organizations, small companies, bringing in money to create jobs. One of my favorite projects in 2006, I worked with then County Commissioner Peter Lawson Jones to secure $4 million for the county's Fatherhood Initiative, which reunites urban fathers with their children. We pulled down $4 million in federal funding. That was 15 years ago. The county has funded that program ever since because it's been so successful uniting fathers with their children. Another great project was the land bank project. So back in 2007, worked with then Treasurer Jim Rokakis to create the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, which was important because we had a lot of abandoned, vacant properties that were being used as drug houses. And so the land bank took over those properties, demolished the ones that couldn't be saved, renovated those that could be saved, created thousands of opportunities for new green space in the urban core, as well as new, affordable, private housing. Sounds familiar. So that work has informed my vision for Cuyahoga County: welcoming communities, affordable private housing, and job creation.
The Opportunity Corridor, that amazing, I've driven it 3 or 4 times now, 55th Street, right up to the clinic. Is that an appropriate use of public funds?
So that was a state project. I think it was $300 million for 3 miles, so $100 million per mile. It's up to the city of Cleveland to leverage Opportunity Corridor, and of course, I'll be there as county executive to help them leverage it. There are some projects that have already started, with Orlando Baking, for example, and some other
Right.
projects. We need to see people start assembling bigger plots of land for bigger projects. It's perfectly sited, though. You have access to the highway, you have access to fresh water, you have access to a workforce that wants to work. So if we can use the Opportunity Corridor to attract companies into the urban core, which really is my vision, we have to move companies into the urban core. Great example, not far from the Opportunity Corridor, is the Midtown Corridor, where you've got companies like MCPC, Dealer Tire, Pierre's Ice Cream, that don't require a college degree for many of their workforce. And that opens up opportunities for people who live in Huff, in Glenville, and Mount Pleasant to work near home. I want to take that model in Midtown Corridor and take it to Huff, Mount Pleasant, and Glenville, and create companies that can employ people in those neighborhoods who can walk to work or take the bus to work. So let's really focus on the urban core, incentivize companies to stay, grow, or relocate to the urban core, create jobs there for people who need them.
Incentives would mean financial obligations and help from the county, state, local, federal governments.
That's right.
How do we determine in this issue that I consider anti-regionalism, how do you create a situation where other communities are coming in saying, we want them in our city, we're not going to let you come to Cleveland because we're going to give you a better deal? Because we know that happens.
Well, and it's hard to coordinate efforts. You have 59
Right. Right.
municipalities within Cuyahoga County,
Right.
and they're all fighting for jobs.
Absolutely.
Because the mayor's there to find their success based on how many new jobs they bring into their community. I would focus and I would favor, as county executive, jobs in the urban core. Most unemployed people, unfortunately, in Cuyahoga County live in the urban core. Very few live in the far-flung suburbs. And we've tried to move unemployed people from the urban core to the far-flung suburbs without much success. Aren't enough bus lines, aren't enough fixed rail lines to get people from the urban core out to the further out suburbs. So I think if we're going to really save the city of Cleveland, if we're going to improve the mother city, the core of Cuyahoga County, we have to all believe that creating jobs in that core is critical to the health of the city, but the health of the county as well. Because as Cleveland goes, so goes Cuyahoga County. And if you doubt that for a moment, look at Detroit in the 1980s. As Detroit began to sink, so did Wayne County, Michigan. So I want to stop that from happening in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. Let's invest in the urban core. It's in all of our interest to make sure that Cleveland is a thriving, successful community.
What has caused Cleveland to not be a thriving, successful community? The city.
I think the city and county have not worked well together. When I was county commissioner, I worked very closely with Mike White, the mayor of Cleveland at the time, on the Browns issue and on other issues. Since then, we've seen the city and county on parallel tracks. Very rarely do they meet and talk and combine resources together to try and solve problems. I won't have that problem because Justin Bibb, the new mayor of Cleveland, someone I know very well. In fact, he was a summer intern for my company in 2006. And I was at an event last night with Mayor Bibb. He did a wonderful job laying out his vision for the city, which approximates my vision for the county very nicely. So I think we would have an opportunity to work together to solve challenges like employment, poverty, crime, unemployment in the city of Cleveland, and address it at a broader scale using the resources not just of the city of Cleveland, but of Cuyahoga County as well.
Crime. COVID brought people home. Now the theory is that COVID is not as bad. People are going back out. Carjackings and crime, and we both know every day that Plain Dealer's leadoff is how many people were injured and harmed and shot and drugged and terrible things.
Yeah.
How do we make an attempt to find some way of, at the county level, at your job level, bringing it to a better number?
Let me give you two ideas. The first would be the county sheriff has 150 deputies. I want to increase that by about 100 to 250. Take those new 100 deputies and have them partner with local police departments like Cleveland, East Cleveland, Cleveland Heights. And that will allow, so the sheriff's deputies will focus on investigating major crimes like kidnapping, human trafficking, drug rings. That gets more police on the street in neighborhoods, fighting crime at the source, but also working with the community to know the community better, so we have a better relationship between the police and those living in our neighborhoods. So we can fight crime at the source. What's more fundamental to me is trying to stop crime before it even occurs. So I look at my housing initiative, 10,000 homes for Cuyahoga County. If you inject wealth into communities like Cleveland and East Cleveland, you can stop crime. There was a study that was done of the Buckeye Woodhill neighborhood on the east side of Cleveland. In 2016, there were no new construction going on there. Crime was rampant. There were big pockets of high crime areas in the Buckeye Woodhill neighborhood. Habitat for Humanity, which is a wonderful organization that I'll work with when I'm county executive, built 50 or 60 new homes in that community. 4 years later, the areas of high crime disappeared. And you had only medium and low crime areas in those neighborhoods. Because people who own homes and have jobs don't tend to commit crimes. And they have more time to spend with their children at a young age and keep them on the straight and narrow path. So I think we can attack crime before it starts by injecting wealth in the urban core through private home ownership, focused job creation, and entrepreneurship.
Let's, again, segue to a little different area. Do you know what the salary is for a county executive?
$175,000 a year.
And do you know what the salary is for the current executive's chief of staff?
$235,000.
And why would the chief of staff make $60,000 more than the county executive?
That was the choice that Executive Budish made when he hired Bill Mason. I don't think we need to pay that kind of money to get good talent. And I won't put any artificial barriers or ceilings on, but I can guarantee you that people that I hire will be better for the county, and they will not cost as much money. I'm going to hire people who want to be in government.
Yeah.
And whether it be younger people who see an opportunity to give back to the community at a young age, or those who are retired and want to give back their way. I believe there is a great thirsting, a great hunger in our community for public service. I don't think we need to attract people just based on the salary or the perks. And so I'm going to attract people to come with me in county government who share my vision for government of the people, government that's not of the government, and will work at a reasonable salary, but will recognize that the benefit they're getting is more than just compensation, that they are helping people who really need help.
When we changed from 3 county executives to 1, and then we had the Council of 11, were you in favor of that change of government?
So I think the 3 county commissioners work pretty well, and it's because county government is an administrative form of government. The legislative branch of the county government, the county council, it's difficult to sometimes understand the role that they play because not much of what we do is legislative in nature. It really is administrative. I mean, the county government gets money from federal government, state government, and what we raise locally in property and sales taxes to administer programs. That worked very well under a 3 county commissioner form of government. But you had 1 county commissioner and 1 county auditor that broke the rules, and that led to a movement to swap out the 3 commissioners for the executive and the county council. At the time, I did not favor that the new form of government, and we've seen now, it'll be 12 years, mostly failings in county government. But I don't think it's because of the form of government. I think it's because of the people we've had in government. I believe a good county executive working with a strong county council can be very successful for Cuyahoga County. And so I'm looking forward to being that county executive, working with the county council to implement the vision I have for the county, along with the input from the county council to really improve the lives of people in need in Cuyahoga County.
So the current county executive will have 8 years in, come the end of this year. Sounds from what you're saying, you've not been pleased with his work. Can you tell us what you would have done different under the circumstances that he's faced these past 8 years, generally?
So, again, I want to go back to the core of county government services.
Okay.
I don't want to fund hotels, medical marts, convention centers, and this new microgrid idea, which will make the hotel look like a good idea. The notion that the county could run an energy generation operation is ludicrous. It's very complex. The county is not prepared to manage energy generation and transmission. So I would stop that, and I will stop that program in its tracks. Unplug the microgrid, I like to say. I would put a lot more money into community-based programs. Here's a good example. There are wonderful nonprofit organizations that do important work in the community, but they're not rewarded by the county. So Providence House is a good example of that. It's a crisis nursery on the west side, now on the east side. Last year, Providence House served 400 families in crisis. They turned away 400 families as well. The county gives them a total of $50,000 a year, which is not nearly enough to fund their important services. So I would move a lot of the work we do to the nonprofit organizations, the community. I think they deliver services with greater efficiency, effect, and enthusiasm than the government does. I would shrink the size of government, and I take those savings and invest them back in the community in my homes initiative, entrepreneurship initiative, and incentivizing companies to come to the urban core initiative. For most of the time that Armin Budish ran county government, they ran operating deficits in their budget. So in 2020, when COVID hit, the county was actually very short on cash. And the county got $215 million in CARES Act funding. Mm-hmm. This is before ARPA. The county used 2/3 of that to cover its payroll because they had drained the cash from the county coffers the prior 5 years. I wouldn't have done that. So in 2020, I would have had money to disperse to nonprofit organizations, small businesses, and families that were really hurting from COVID. Great example is the food bank. Out of $215 million, the county gave the food bank $200,000. Now, the food bank served 1 out of 4 county residents in 2020, including 100,000 first-time customers. The county gave $500,000 to the Hilton Hotel and $2.4 million to the convention center, although there was not a single convention in 2020. So it's really about priorities. This government has spent money in ways I would never have done, and I would change priorities to invest in programs that help people improve their lives.
By the way, Kristen has sat in that chair from the food bank. A couple of years ago, she sat here and talked about the county, multiple county-wide services that they render, and it is remarkable. In the time we have left, I have to talk about the general scope of how people define the two-party system that we have. We have people aiming for the fringes on both parties, and people, seems to me, veering away from the center of the two parties. One, is that a fair statement?
Very fair statement. I think what you've seen the last, let's say 20 years, has been a radical change in the party structure of America. In 2016, I gave a TED Talk, and I did a lot of research. I looked at Congress. In the 1970s, out of 435 members of Congress, 250 were self-identified moderates. That's 2/3.
What year was that? I'm sorry?
In the 1970s.
Yeah.
Today,
Nixon.
Today, you couldn't find 2 or 5 who would say that they're moderates.
Right.
So what's happened is big money has pushed the parties to the right in the case of Republicans, and the left in the case of Democrats. But most Americans are in the middle.
Right.
Most of my friends, most of your friends are center right or center left.
Okay.
We're not represented by the parties any longer. And so we're forced to choose candidates that we view to be extremely left, extremely right. My vision for the county, as I said earlier, is not Republican or Democrat. It's a common sense vision that invests in people, those in need particularly, to make it a better place for all of us. And so I push aside the partisanship and the parties. I'm talking to people about issues that I think matter to them: taxes, jobs, crime, safety, and it's resonating. They understand that I come from a centrist position with a message and solutions that meet the needs of the vast majority of the people of Cuyahoga County.
But when they walk into that booth in November, is it fair to think that D's vote for a D and R's vote for an R?
It's not fair to think that.
Okay.
In 2014, John Kasich, running for re-election as governor, carried Cuyahoga County against the sitting county executive, Ed Fitzgerald. So you can win Cuyahoga County as a Republican if you have the right message. And again, I'm running a campaign of ideas, not ideology. I believe my Cuyahoga 2030 vision, which focuses on people, job creation, fighting crime, making our communities safer, and creating private housing opportunities, is a winning formula for me in November 8th of this year. I expect to win. I'll get Republican votes, I'll get Democratic votes, I'll get independent votes, I'll get the votes I need to become the next county executive of Cuyahoga County.
So let's go to, I hope these are quick, simple answers to quick, simple questions.
I'll make them simple if you want me to.
Ronald Reagan. Government's too big. Was he right?
He didn't actually shrink government at all. I mean, he
Correct.
talked a good game, but the budget grew every year under Reagan's administration. He spent more money in defense than on non-defense, but he never cut non-defense spending either. So government has grown every year in Washington since we can remember. The last balanced budget was in 1998 when you had a Democratic president and a Republican Congress.
Clinton.
And Newt Gingrich running Congress.
Yes.
So maybe what we need is both parties involved in the government. They act as a check on each other and maybe a check on spending as well.
American Care Act. It was called the Obama Act so early on, I think, to create some negativism among certain sectors, but it sure does seem to be a central part of American public services for medical issues now. Is that fair?
So I think Obamacare is largely in the rearview mirror for most people. I don't hear much about it these days as I'm campaigning.
Yeah.
It has become the law of the land,
Right.
much like Social Security did in the 1930s,
Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid in the 1960s. There may not have been cross-aisle support for those programs back then, but people begin to realize that the programs work pretty well. And so now we're on to other issues, but I think the Affordable Care Act is in place and will remain in place. It's been challenged twice at the Supreme Court.
Right.
Twice it's been upheld. It's been tried to be defunded. It hasn't worked either. So I think it's in place. Ohio, Governor Kasich accepted the additional Medicaid funding, which provided health care to hundreds of thousands of people, working poor people who wanted to maintain a job but needed health care. And so that's helped keep our economy strong in Ohio, having health care available for those who need it and also want to work in a job.
Governor DeWine seems like an awful, fair, caring, kind man who has found a long time in public office. But he sure does seem to be catching a lot of wind from the right of the right. Is that fair?
It's fair. I think the further right parts of the party will come home and support Mike DeWine when we see who his opponent is, if it's either Nan Whaley or John Cranley. Republicans tend to come home, as Democrats do. Mike DeWine is extremely popular in Cuyahoga County, and I expect he will carry Cuyahoga County in this year. So he'll get through the primary just fine. He'll win the general election. I think he'll win by 15 or 20 points. This is going to be a Republican year throughout the state of Ohio, even in Cuyahoga County, I believe. So Mike's commitment to public service is almost unmatched in Ohio
Correct.
history.
Yeah.
He's held every office except, I think, President of the United States, and he's done a remarkable job in all those offices.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue with his record as governor of Ohio, as U.S. Senator, and so I am a big Mike DeWine fan, and I believe he's served Ohio well and will serve Ohio well for another 4 years as governor.
Bob Portman.
Rob Portman's been a very strong U.S. Senator, 2 terms. I was sorry to see him not seek a 3rd term.
Yeah.
He's been a moderating voice in the Senate, someone who gets things done. As I mentioned earlier, there are very few of those left, it seems like, because we've gone to the extremes in both camps. He's been a person that can work across the aisle, for example, to pass infrastructure bill, which is very important and will be important for communities across the country, including Cuyahoga County,
Yes.
where we need a lot of infrastructure dollars poured into our roads and our bridges.
Were you surprised that he came out today and said he was going to vote no on Judge Brown?
I was surprised. I read his rationale, which is he just didn't agree with her political philosophy or judicial philosophy. That's his decision to make.
Okay. Critical race teaching.
Theory.
Theory.
Yeah, so I gave a speech to the Republican Party 3 months ago. And I said, as Republicans, we should embrace the broadest view of history that we can. Because in history, the Republican Party looks very, very good. We were formed in 1854 with a single objective, to end slavery. Democratic Party, for most of its existence, has been in favor of slavery, Jim Crow, and segregation. Only lately, the last few decades, has the Democratic Party come around to the Republican notion of civil rights. So I believe in a broad teaching of history because the Republican Party looks really good in that teaching.
We had this morning or this afternoon, or maybe it was yesterday, a new bill, 616, that takes "Don't Say Gay" from Florida, and now going to be discussed. What are your thoughts on that?
So the critical portion of that is the discussion of sexual matters in kindergarten through third grade. My kids went to chick rights schools. In kindergarten, they were well prepared for school because they had two parents who were home with them and helped them learn their reading and writing and spelling. A lot of kids in the Shaker schools and other schools don't enter with that advantage. They don't have preschool programs. We need to focus on the core of education, reading, writing, and spelling in K through third grade. I got sex education, I teach classes in 7th grade. That seems the much more appropriate time to start sex education, 7th grade, than kindergarten. So let's focus on the basics of school in K through 3. Let's get kids reading, writing, and spelling before we talk about other things that are not as important in my mind.
President Biden.
Has had a very tough time. Elected in 2020, clearly elected, by the way. I don't challenge that. I think he probably might have been a good president a long time ago, but right now he is not a good president. He doesn't have control of his own party, which is remarkable. I can't think of a time in history when a president lost control of his party this early in his administration. And that's because in the House, they are left of where he is, and in the Senate, they are right of where he is. And he can't seem to bridge that gap on the domestic front. We have inflation. Significant inflation that's been caused by big government spending, no question about that, and some issues around supply chain. But really, it's because we've spent a lot more money than we brought in taxes in the government. It's caused massive inflation for people, the gas pump, and the grocery store. You're seeing that in Cuyahoga County and across the country. So I feel he's over his head, and he's got to get back on the right track if he's going to seek re-election in 2024.
President Trump.
He's out of office.
And you said before that you don't agree with him on the issue of whether he has a right to remain in office. What do you think about his conduct on January 6th?
So I think there are a lot of things motivating people on January 6th. And I'll take at their word people who said they're motivated by President Trump. They were convicted or they pled guilty in many cases based on that. If they say they're motivated by President Trump, then I'll take them at their word.
Favorite U.S. president?
Abraham Lincoln.
Because?
Because he stood for something, and he stood for it for 4.5 years. He knew from the beginning of his presidency, he walked into a presidency like none before. No president has lost half the country before he takes the oath of office.
Yeah.
And so he knew his job, which was to keep the country together. That's the oath of office that you take as President of the United States.
Yes.
And he worked day and night to make that happen, and he was successful. And then, of course, he was assassinated, and it became one for the ages. It's hard to find somebody who was more committed to the office than Abraham Lincoln.
Tell us, as my final question, why you are the better candidate. Speak to the people watching. Why are you the better candidate for this position, sir?
Well, I talked about the 4 qualities of being county executive. The first is experience, and I have experience as a former county commissioner. Secondly is vision. I've laid out a very clear vision for what I want to do as county executive. No one else in this race has done that. You can go to my website to prove it. It's www.weingart2022.com. And then check out the websites of my Democratic opponents as well. Thirdly, transparency and honesty. When I was county commissioner, we didn't have scandals like you've had the last 25 years in county government. In fact, you've had one-party government since I left in 1997, and the county has gone downhill every year. And then lastly, enforcing the rules as they are on the books. Last week, it was announced they were going to take $66 million of our $240 million ARPA funds and allow individual council members to disperse the funds within their districts. I determined that that's against the county charter. The county charter is very clear that you cannot do that. And so I went on Channel 5 and I said that. So I believe in following the rules. I'm not going to skirt the rules. I'm not going to give insiders or people who are connected a break. So because of my experience, my vision, my commitment to honesty and openness, and my commitment to enforcing the rules, I believe I am the better candidate for county executive. I'll be elected by the people on November 8th, Cuyahoga County executive.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much. This is great.
I hope you've enjoyed it. And thank you all for watching. Next week, Adam Rosen will be here to talk about Cuyahoga County and Cleveland real estate matters. Thank you very much.